everyone. Thank you. Welcome to AVA Gallery and Art Center. I'm Sam Eckert, Exhibition Manager. Thank you all for joining us today for a conversation with the artist Tom Fels and guest curator John Stumber. As many of you know, 2023 is AVA's 50th anniversary year. Besides these two exhibitions, we have several events planned for the year, and we hope to see you again over the coming months. From April 14th through the 28th, we will present Bloom, an exhibition of artist-donated works to be featured in all named galleries and in the lobby gallery. The exhibition will culminate in a benefit party and live and silent auction on Friday, April 28th from 5:30 to 8:30. You can purchase tickets to the event on our website. Before we get started with John and Tom, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the Mount Rushmore Foundation. Thank you, Linda and Rick Rush, for your ongoing generous support of AVA and these joyous exhibitions. Additional thanks to the Clifford B. West Fund and the Hilton Garden Inn. Many thanks to John Stumber for donating his time and expertise in curating these two vibrant exhibitions. On view through March 31st. Besides his artistic practice, many years Tom Fels has been an independent curator and writer specializing in American culture, photography, and art. He has worked as consultant and guest curator to several museums, including the Canadian Center for Architecture and the J. Paul Getty Museum. He has organized more than 50 exhibitions and written numerous articles, catalogs, and books. He began showing his recent artwork in the Northeast in 2013. His work has been shown at AIPAD, Paris Photo, the Atlas Gallery, Christie's in London, and many other venues. His art is represented in museums and private collections, including the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. It's my honor and great pleasure to introduce the artist Tom Fels and our esteemed guest curator, John R. Stumber, Virginia Rice Kelsey, 1961 S, Director of the Hood Museum of Art.
Gotta have this close when I start singing my aria. Great to see you all. Thank you for coming out. It's another great day at AVA. Thank you to Terry and Sam so much for allowing Tom and I to work on this project. We really collaborated on this project together. So I think we are both grateful for the opportunity. And it's been really, really fun and rewarding. And again, thank you to Rick and Linda. You know, as I said last time, if XYZ Corp International Limited would like to give us a grant, we're welcome to it. But more typical of AVA is Rick and Linda, right? You know, like, we know Rick and Linda, they live up there, and they're helping us out. So thank you guys, it's terrific. And we're the beneficiaries. So what we've got today is a conversation between Tom and myself, and we'll leave time at the end for questions. I'm sure if you have a burning question that just has to come out in a minute, we could probably handle that, but we are leaving time for Q&A at the end. So I want to start by picking up where Sam left off. You'll notice that Tom has been a writer and an art historian, and went to graduate school, and has curated shows, and has published articles, but nowhere in there did you hear about the 6-year stint at RISD, and then he hit the art world running, right? So I thought we should really start by asking Tom, how did you get here? What was the process like to start making art? And then, because a lot of people in this room are artists, there's a question I want you to answer if you feel comfortable, which is, at what point did you say to yourself, okay, now I'm an artist?
Oh my gosh. Well, I did not go to RISD, just so that you know. That was that was a gesture. I would have to say I've always done art since I was very young, and up till about the early 80s, I still produced various kinds of things and had a show, actually, while I was in graduate school. I think I sold 2 pieces, to my cousins. I realized this was not probably a career path. And then there was a career of being a curator and writer, so that was about 25 years. And it took me that long for my next show. In between, I learned a lot about art, and including some of the vintage processes like the cyanotype. So I had a history of doing art, which would be mostly drawing and watercolors. And then I had the background of history of photography, which was largely what I did, 19th century photographs. So at a certain point, if you'll see in the other room, I saw these beautiful shadows, and I tried to figure out how to capture them, and that took me into, well, what kind of medium is there that you could use to do that? And I ended up with cyanotypes, and I did them for fun, basically. But it turned out I had a small gallery. It's in Gloucester, and through the small gallery, the word sort of got out. That's a whole other story. And suddenly, people liked these, and so that's when I had to kind of take myself seriously or go home, So that's kind of the story. But it's interesting, I think, especially artists would understand this. Small gallery, but when I looked at this woman's website, she had also small galleries, not only in Gloucester, but in Santa Monica and London. And so I thought, oh, yeah. So through her website, people found me. They were organizing, a place in London was organizing a show of cameraless photographs, and they looked up cyanotypes, and there I was. So that just led to a whole unfolding of this chapter, basically. So, yeah.
Thank you. If we have time, I want to get back to, that's a whole other story, because that's the kind of story we like. But let's see what we can get back to. Because I think we are all really interested in the steps it took to get from making art at home in your studio to having a show in London. I mean, really, that's a big step, right? So
it was a big step. Well, no, that is pretty much the story. It's just that the web did this, and then these people in London just liked the work as you do, which is huge. And so one thing I learned, especially in the writing trade, but most of these, don't bother knocking on doors where they're not interested, As soon as somebody shows some interest, you have to do something, and so that's what happened. And yes, that gallery took a few things for the show that they were researching, but then they said, well, so what else do you have? And so ever since I've been sending rolls of cyanotypes to them. You have to pursue whatever comes up is my message there.
thank you for that. I find it interesting, and my way into your work was through the cyanotypes, Truth in Advertising. We acquired a triptych for the Hood Museum where I work about 4 years ago now, something like that. Really fantastic, one of the Catalpa series. So my pathway into your work was through the cyanotypes, which is, it's interesting because it's such a handcrafted, old-fashioned methodology. I mean, you're really making an image. It's one of the most direct kind of photographic processes there are, whereas we have digital technology and computers, and it seems to me like you could get a lot of that stuff by using contemporary technology, but you're using, he's literally climbing up a tree with a sheet of cyanotype paper. Anyhow, I won't ask him about the safety part, but he's literally like doing this, he's building these images for us. So why is that, and what is the attraction of building an image? And have you ever contemplated just grabbing some Photoshop and doing something else?
No. I have not. But you described it very well. I like the simplicity of this process. So when I saw these shadows, there's a photograph of them in the other room. My first impulse was to take a picture of it. And you can take very nice photographs of shadows, and people do that. But I wasn't getting the effect that I wanted. I tried to draw them, and that didn't really work. And then I looked up where could you get large cyanotype paper, and this was the biggest that I could find. It's still the biggest that I can find. So the difference is really, yes, you could achieve some of this with a camera, and you certainly could do comparable things. But I like the process, which is fairly simple, and I like the fact that you're up there in nature. Sometimes there is a ladder involved. And I can explain how it's done, but with a camera you get whatever is there. With these, I discovered some things. One was the motion that you'll probably see in them, and I hadn't expected that at all. My history was Anna Atkins and very early cyanotypes, and you put something on the paper and that's what you get. Where, yes, I have a good little demonstration I'll show you. But for these, to get what I was trying to get a lot of contrast, it has to touch almost, and so you can't really do that without addressing the bush or the tree. And so, you can imagine what's involved. Don't try to do it on a windy day. Sometimes I would tape the paper onto a piece of cardboard so that it was a little more manageable. But there's tricks to doing it. But a lot of what turned out to matter was this kind of lively element that got into them, and I really liked that. Right from the first print I made, I could see this was fun. Another thing that I learned though was, and it's different from a camera, you can have the ugliest weed, but it can make a beautiful print. And so you look at things differently. And the third thing was just the world of shadows. I just can't walk by a shadow anymore. But you can't really record them this way. They don't, it doesn't really work. So I'll just show you this, because people often ask me how you do this. Tree. No. So if it touches, you get a much brighter thing, sure. And if it's away, you get more of a shadow. And then you expose it, depending on the sun and the day and the time of year. And then you wash it with water, dry it. There's kind of little tricks to all this, but it's analogous to a photograph, which is, you see it, you take a picture, you develop it. But I tend to like simplicity in all the media that I am involved in, and this is as simple as it gets. And people say, well, couldn't you do other things with them? Yes, you can. Or couldn't you use a camera? Yes, you could. But this is what I like, and okay, they're all blue, so I try to, intersperse them with photos and drawings and other things. But that's kind of the story of that and why they're different.
So I have a slight curveball. It just struck me while you were talking that in a way your cyanotypes are really achieving kind of the modernist goal. The holy grail for modernism in a way was time. Right? Those early practitioners in the early 20th century had, we'd long since sort of figured out how to do 3 dimensions by doing single point perspective. So you had width and height, and then we could pretend we had depth by doing single point perspective. But a lot of modern artists said, but we really experience life through time. And so Cubism and Futurism and all of these ideas were a way of trying to get time into the photograph. And just while you're talking, it dawned on me that that's exactly what you've done. And that's why your cyanotypes stand out so much, because they're totally modernist in that way. Because of when you look at them, you feel like you can see motion.
Yes, I think that's true. I mean, I would call them timeless because, they could have been done anytime, really. I think it does tie into that. And a lot of photographers say 100 years ago, were interested in these processes. They would do photograms, so they would use actual film, whereas I'm using a different kind of piece of paper, type of paper. That is another difference too. You can take a photograph of these and you can print them, but you don't get the quality of the paper, and there are other qualities to the original print that people like, just like they like original paintings. Yeah, well, I'm a modernist, I guess. A secret.
Yeah,
secret modernist.
I think I just figured that out. While we were talking.
Old-fashioned modernist.
So he doesn't just make cyanotypes. He actually makes a lot of different things. And we have a suite of his color photography up front, right when you walk in. You'll see they're really quite stunning. So how different for you is your color photography, which is camera, lens, so forth? And are you after different results or just a different path to the same content?
I would say different. The way I do those photographs, or most photographs these days, I will see something and I'll try to go back and take the photograph. I don't really go out and prospect for views. And my view in both of these, there's another bunch in this room, is to kind of show things that people don't see all the time, or they see them but they don't register them. And I just found that all around me were things that you could call beautiful or interesting that were largely overlooked. And that's the premise of those. And so when I see something like that, I go after it. So yes, the result is different, and what I'm trying is different. I don't have a fancy camera. It's still the simple philosophy, it's just a little camera. But little cameras have very good lenses these days, so I end up with very nice prints. Also, with a camera, of course, you can, different sizes and so on, you can do all kinds of things with them. But yes, it's a different kind of mission. And just sort of parallel to that, I don't take a camera. My wife takes a camera. She's more of a photographer. If I go traveling, I tend to take a sketchbook, and I feel you have to look longer. You have to kind of involve yourself in that more. So these are just kind of quick shots, different than the cyanotypes, different than the other drawings, different than the whatever that I do.
I'm really surprised you don't have a fancy camera, because I have a very fancy camera. Mine comes with a telephone.
I've never seen those.
If you save up, Tom. So you were talking about drawing, and on my first studio visit, I have to confess that my first big surprise was all the drawings. Like, your house is full of drawings that you've made, and a couple different approaches to drawing too. And there were the kind of the minimalist ones. There was the big ones where you kind of using lantern slides. You're very much interested in drawing, and I don't know why. For me, it seemed surprising that somebody who was making photographs and capturing them with cyanotypes was also doing this very different, like the whole mindset to me of making a drawing seems so different. Does it seem different to you? Does it seem totally connected? How do you ever think about the fact?
Yeah, well, they are different for sure. I think if you look at a lot of artists or people in any medium, they do other things. Musicians are painters, painters are musicians, and so on. Or even painters are draftspeople or photographers. So it's not that unusual, and that just means you have to make more studio visits, I think, to catch up with it, honestly. But
Clearly I'm falling behind.
I think the main difference is that cyanotypes are work, and I can kind of see where I'm going with them, and it's fun, and I've learned to get more or less the result that I like. But the drawings are fun to do. I like to do them, and I think maybe painters feel the same way. Strokes, people have ways of making marks, and I really do like that part of it. I included that big drawing because it's derived from a photograph, and that's kind of interesting. It sort of connects in that way. The other drawings, these little, I don't know what I call them, linea, lines, that came from a notebook that I kept on a trip, and I just had a lot of other things on my mind, and I was trying to ignore them. And I just took this little bitty notebook, and I made some lines, and my lesson to myself was that I had to learn from the last drawing before I made another drawing. So after about 100 of these, I had developed a style, you know, of these, and you can use lines in lots of different ways. And I just found that when I went home, I would take sheets of paper, and it was a very meditative thing to do, to try to, you know, the method is sort of try to make a straight line, but of course you can't. So you end up with all these variations, and you learn a lot about how your muscles work in a way. You know, if you look carefully at these, you can kind of see where you press and where you don't press. And that's a very interesting kind of process. So there's two kinds of drawings here, plus some watercolors. I like that variety. And so in spring or summer, lots of leaves, I kind of think about cyanotypes. Other times, you know, I'll spend a week or two doing some drawings, and I like that variety. But about interrelations too, I find in all these media, you know, I play some music, I do some writing, I do these art things. Actually, there's a kind of a language or a sub-language. They all have color, they all have rhythm, they all have sort of a narrative content, the meaning that's in them. And I find that they really influence each other. And I found, you know, my writing has been influenced by music, sort of periodicity and how phrasing works and stuff. And I think they all kind of influence each other, and I like that. I'm not always thinking about it. It's more something that you look at something and you say, oh, yeah, that has a kind of presence that must have come from something in a different medium. So I like that aspect of it, and I like doing these different things.
I mean, you were talking about the importance of music in your life. Do you listen to music while you make art?
I don't. I have to concentrate. I don't know about other people, but you know, packing art maybe, but but not making art. And even then, I don't know.
Tom, I'm interested in your life, Tom, but not in what music you choose to play while you pack art. That's a little obscure.
We'll let that go. We'll let that go. Fiddle's good.
How about drawing? Did you ever take formal drawing classes?
No, and I should emphasize that. I mean, I've picked up a lot of things, but the couple of watercolors in here, you'll see, I never took any watercolor lessons. These are just kind of an extension of drawing. What influenced me was as a kid, I grew up in the shadow of Bennington College and later Putney, but especially Bennington College. There were these amazing people around, and one of them was supposedly the architecture teacher, but he also taught children's art classes, and boy, did I learn a lot from him. You know, just being exposed early, and you know, he would say, try mosaic, you know, try doing a drawing, try cutting up this paper. It was just really liberating, and I think part of the atmosphere of those kinds of institutions, it doesn't have to be that particular one, but you learn that it's okay, you know, it's okay to write, or it's okay to make a painting. It might be different than some other people in your class, but that doesn't matter. They do what they do. So that was kind of the influence for that. No formal training. I don't know if that's good or bad.
I think it's wonderful. I actually recently talked to another artist about the exact same subject, and he's an art teacher. And he said the funniest thing, he said, yeah, drawing's not important. You don't have to learn how to draw. I was like, wait a second, isn't that how you make your living? And he said, yes, but don't tell anybody. But, I mean, obviously, there are other paths, or alternative paths. So at this point, we've clocked you in studying the history of art, writing criticism about photography, both contemporary and historically, curating exhibitions, drawing, doing watercolors, making cyanotypes, making color photographs, and music. That's a really interesting group of activities that kept you busy these last few years. What's next? Do you have any thoughts for next steps?
Yeah, well, I'm usually involved in some kind of lengthy projects, and those are more writing, history, archiving kinds of things. But the weather's warming up, there will be leaves, you know, I have to think, just for your information, the two trees that make up the biggest series that I did were cut down. And so I have to find other subjects. So for example, for the catalpas, which are these big leaves, so what else has big leaves? So I found a chestnut tree, you know, so that I have to look around for new subjects, but the weather would sort of bring that kind of project. As far as cyanotypes themselves, I was experimenting with, here comes the modernity again, modernist kinds of things. You know, you just look around your house, there's boxes, screens, tools, all these things that would make interesting shapes. So I may go in a modernist direction, and then I don't have to worry what season it is.
Wait, are you talking about making objects then?
No, making cyanotypes out of mechanical looking.
Oh, I see, okay. I was gonna say, yes, you hadn't talked about sculpture yet.
No. Don't give me another, no.
Sculptors, you're still safe.
That's right.
Thank you very much. That was my prepared questions. You could probably tell those were basically prepared questions. So we'd like to open it up for all of you. Amy?
Tom, you showed us how to make a 19th century cyanotype, but how do you make them with such big paper? Do you have to, you know, cover the paper that you're not doing at that moment?
Yes.
And then you have to press them? So just tell us more.
You want to hear all my secrets, right?
I'm not going to try it myself.
Yes, that's, you pretty much described it. Have to keep the paper rolled up so it doesn't get exposed. Think about what you're doing, and as an artist pointed out to me that I hadn't really thought about, you have to get some idea of what you're going to get, you know, frame it in some way, open it up, expose it, roll it up again so it doesn't over percolate. And believe me, if anyone needs blue paper, I have lots of overexposed blue paper that you can use. Wash it, any kind of water, dry it a little bit, and then really dry it, which I do by rolling it up. It keeps it fairly flat, you know. And it's pretty much overnight for them to dry. They come up, you know, at first you get a kind of a negative image, you wash it, you get the positive image, and then as it dries, it strengthens. And I think, as far as I know, cyanotypes are very stable, so once they're done, you're pretty much okay. I do put good glass on them, but I'm not sure it's even really necessary. But that's pretty much the process. And if it's too windy, I think I mentioned I tack the paper onto a piece of cardboard so that it's kind of like a negative in an old camera, so it doesn't blow around too much.
I'm very naive with your process, but have done some solar printing, so I apologize for not really knowing the difference between the two. Can you enlighten me?
Well, no, it's the same thing. These are just large. These are just
So
much,
they are
much
the
larger.
same kind of process?
Yes.
Are you using acids at all?
No, and I don't make the paper. So, you know, you can make your own paper, and you can also make cloth, you know, with cyanotype material. I like the simplicity of it, that I can just use it as it comes, and very handily, they're all the same size. So I can reuse frames and things, you know, which is a big expense. No, it's the same thing, they're just on a larger scale.
But the one thing, Joanne, is be very careful if you decide to make your own, because I think the operative word in there is like cyan, like cyanide. So, like, this can be nasty stuff if it's not handled right. So just thought I'd let you know. We like having you around. But yeah, one of the things that Tom was just saying that I think is easy to lose sight of when you see a show and the selection is made and they're all beautifully framed and each one's really kind of a dynamite image. There's a lot that hits the floor. you know, and over time, he's gotten much better at knowing, okay, I've been up here for this long, this leaf has been touching, this one has been moving over here. You know, he's got a much better sense of what's going on than kind of comes out and seeing these perfect projects. I mean, I assure you, because I've tried, the first time you try it, it's not like, boom, you're Tom Fels, unfortunately.
No, this is definitely true. So a couple of variations that I think would interest you and other people. What do you do with blue paper? You know, if you have a lot of blue paper, you can draw on it with chalk, for example. You know, and you get a kind of an interesting quality. I also discovered, I can't remember quite why I did this, but take a piece of plastic or something, you can paint on it. You know, you can make sort of the equivalent of a monotype, except you can actually make as many prints as you want. But you can get your hand involved, which is not involved in these kind of prints. So if I did a drawing that I liked, I might try to kind of interpret it as a cyanotype and print it, and that way I can have an edition of 10 or something. You know, I don't make any big editions. But some of those are nice and surprising. They tend to be classics like that drawing. They're kind of based on statues or buildings or things that I'm interested in that have nice light and shadow in them.
Yeah, you should tell them about your glass slides.
Yeah.
Well,
at the slide room where I used to work, anyway, when one needs a job, you know, they were throwing out tons of glass slides, and a lot of them were really beautiful. So I just said, I'll just take 10 or whatever. I have a few of them. And so I liked the composition, and I really didn't think I could do any better, you know, of a bridge in Rome or statue in the Louvre, or, you know. So I would just use that basic image and then turn it into a drawing. And as I was saying, it's fun to do the drawing. So those are my strokes, you know, my strokes on the paper, but it's based on a photograph. And the trouble in our era, I mean, what in the world are you going to do with, you know, thousands of things that are 2-inch square? And I'm sure there are reproductions of them, you know, somewhere, but that's how I use them.
yeah, I've seen those glass slides made into candles. Candle holders, that's really, you know. Other questions? Louise?
I was thinking about your comment early on about the parallels in the appreciation of music, art, and writing in terms of phrasing, color, maybe pitch. I don't know who said that, but, and I was wondering, in terms of making each of those, are there parallels in the process, or are the processes different for you? Or maybe, I don't know, maybe you don't make music, or you don't, but I know you write and you make art. Are the, what I'm saying, is there a difference in the appreciation of it and the making of it in terms of process? You know what I mean?
Well, you know, every medium is going to have its own thing. I would say the best example is just if you play much music or sing, you know, folk music, you just can't avoid phrasing and volume and all these things. And I just find that it echoes in my writing. You know, that's the thing that I see the most. But I would just say there's this underlanguage of concepts that you see in these different media. I don't think you would say, I'm going to try to write the way I paint or something like that. Although people, I'm sure, do something like that. But I'm just saying I think there are links in the artistic vocabulary that kind of link these things.
Hi.
Did you, when you were developing this process, did you evolve into the idea of presenting them as diptychs, triptychs, multi-ticks, whatever? Or did they, that idea of presentation come to you afterwards?
I think I noticed that there was the potential to do that. You know, I started out with single 2x3 foot pieces. They seemed pretty big to me. But when I had a show, the first show I ever had about 6 or something of these. And it was pretty clear that you could do more. And so that's when I found these big catalpa leaves. And on that tree, it was pretty clear if you kind of did this, you could get a triptych. So there were triptychs. It just seemed an opportunity, and also they looked terrific, you know, and different than the single ones. So that's kind of the way that evolved. And then there's one out there with 5. There's a limit, because how much can you see or care about at once? And the one with 6, you know, that's sort of a different concept also, which is something that I should mention. The ones up in the trees or bushes, you know, that is one. At another season, I can put them on the ground, and so that's what that is. And you can do different things, especially if it's not such a bright day. You can take your time. You put things on at different times, and you get different. Yeah. So that was kind of a discovery also.
How did you get those ginkgos to move?
Right?
You know,
Yeah.
the most beautiful.
You can do it. I'd leave that to you to
I'm
try.
too old
but-
to start.
Oh, you're too old to start. Well, try jiggling it a little, or, you know, there's different things you can do to get motion into a picture. You know, even photographs, people do this. So you move the camera or take a shot of something moving. You know, it's not unique, but those were, you know, I did those with that in mind. So that's kind of how I did it on the ground. So it's,
That sense of motion really is the magic, isn't it? I mean, when you look at them, it really, you can feel the shimmering afternoon, you can feel the sunlight. It's just astounding. It's really fantastic. Yeah, very exciting. Yes, sir.
Yes, about 20 years ago, I read a book by Edward Said. It's called The Late Style. It was about painters and musicians who, later in their lives, they started doing the work a little differently. And Tom, and I've known Tom for a long time, I know for a fact he's an old guy. And he seems to have become an artist and kind of shifted into the late style.
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether you think that could this have been stuff that you could have done earlier in your life? Or you also talked about fun. This is fun. It is because it was fun. And this is the kind of thing that in the late style you can do because you're a successful musician and you can fool around your Monet or Picasso, but you can fool around. There's a kind of end of ambition, no fear of failure. And I'm just wondering how much that played into your role in becoming an artist very late in life.
that is interesting. Of course, one could have done things earlier. You know, I would just say this evolved sort of the way I described. It was a surprise to me that people like these things. I mean, I like them, but I've been through various phases. I won't belabor them, but you know, sort of different chapters in my life, and this came up at a time when I could pursue it. You know, I think it was partly wanting to make them, as I've kind of described. I saw opportunities there visually, but I think it also combined things that I knew. Like, the first book review I ever did really was about Anna Atkins, so I knew about cyanotypes from years ago. It benefited from early experience, but I'd say I hadn't stumbled on it. That's basically what I would say. And also, I'd have to say I still do all these things, and so trying to fit them all in, which I don't do these all the time. I sort of do them when I have time to do them.
But you never came to a point where you said, you know what, I'm going to make some art. Be an artist, and then all this other stuff, now I'm going to do art.
Well, it sort of occurred, you know.
He said, so he was asking really, was there a moment when you said, I'm going to do art, I'm going to be an artist, here I go. This is it, this is me now, I'm an artist.
I would say, I think part of what you're asking is, I found that people did like them, and therefore it was a kind of affirmation to that part of my life. You know, I've made lots of art over the years, not in quantity so much, but it accumulates. And you know, I see it as coming from a certain period of my life, and that it means something to me. But when people started responding to them, it's nice to have people agree with what you see, you know, and or write or whatever it might be. And that definitely played a role. I mean, I probably could do this on Saturdays occasionally, but I do more of it because there seems to be an interest in it. And so that's kind of the, as I said earlier, the don't bother knocking on doors line, you know. There seemed to be an opportunity, so why not do that? And it has knocked some other things out of the way, and this is part of my long-term story. You know, I was working on, I think, an art project, and suddenly someone said, I want to publish your book, you know, so I had to put the art project on hold. Then when the book was done, I go back to the art, you know, that's kind of the way I live, and I wake up in the morning, I don't quite know what I'm going to do, but I have a spectrum of things that I could do. Yeah, I'd say it's just taken over, basically.
So I was just going to add to that a little bit. As both a historian who studied late styles and an old guy myself, one of the things that I really appreciate for artists is that there's a certain point, and it's not at one age, it's not like 57, you know, but it happens in a lot of artists' career where they just get comfortable in their old skin. And David Bowie had a great quote, which he said, aging is a process of becoming the person you were always meant to be. And there's some point when a lot of people's lives were like the preening, the posturing, the real over-concern, all that stuff that gets in the way of just making art directly from you kind of falls by the wayside. And you know, and it's clearly this has happened to this gentleman at some point. At some point, it's just like, I'm going to start making art that really matters to me, and we're all responding to it.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, people have known that I made art right along. Someone once said, "Oh, you could be a decorator," you know. I was like, "Well, I'm a curator. That's kind of close, you know." So it wasn't really a surprise that this happened, but it was a surprise that it was cyanotypes and that suddenly there were these galleries that wanted to show them. And, you know, great.
Yeah.
You talk about the delight that you experience when people respond to your artwork. Do you experience the same kind of delight when people respond to your writing?
Oh yes, and the same dislike when they don't. People get very angry about things that I've written, but yes, I think it's always good, and people underestimate how important it is, you know, and artists spend lots of time in their studio producing these things, and they don't always get to see them. Part of one thing I learned as a curator was it's an art to present art, you know, and people are actually kind of shocked sometimes even to see their own art the way it's presented by other people. And so I kind of have both sides of that, and I like the way my part of this show worked out for me. That's, you know, that would be part of how I see things. And it's nice to have people appreciate that, yeah, whatever the medium.
Yeah, it was different working with Tom because he was a curator, so he had really strong ideas about self-presentation, and they were good, right? So we worked very much super collaboratively. He had a very strong hand in doing the show, whereas Sachi and Chris and Kayla dropped their works off, and I did the installation. It was an entirely different thing. But that's fine, there's no one right way of doing it. It became clear from the get-go that Tom had thought as a curator for a long time, so that was
and the reason for that was how much blue can you take, you know, and so it kind of needed to have these other things that John wasn't that familiar with, and I kind of ran them by him, and he said, okay, this sounds good.
I love the blue.
Well, okay.
Yeah, no, it was great to come up and see all the other work. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Speaking of the other work, Shadows series and the series of In Search of Beauty series, these are very fugitive moments that get captured in these pictures. And I'm wondering if there are alternative images that you had to reject, or whether you just got it from the get-go.
There are certainly some I reject, but I have a pretty good idea of it. I'm not someone who takes a lot of pictures, but I would take one or two or three of something and then pick the one that I like. So there aren't too many on the cutting room floor. But there are also ones that just didn't turn out to be what I thought. And these, as you pointed out to me, they're just on the borderline there. I mean, these are things that you might see and you might ignore, or if you saw them, you wouldn't bother to take a picture. But I go back because they kind of fit into an agenda that I have, which is, here's this world around you, and anybody could take these pictures if they want, and maybe they'd be influenced, to see these and taking their own, or seeing things differently. And I've certainly found that being more involved in visual arts in my late years, I do see things differently, and I don't mind changing, being influenced. Those are, they're basically local scenes that you would ignore, and the ones that I'm showing, I feel are strong. So there's many others, but not hundreds, more like 50 or something, of which this is only half or a third. I do like them, and I just think part of the lesson is anybody could do this.
As long as you're looking.
You have to look.
You have to look. I was going to say one other thing about his photographs. A lot of times you can kind of break down camera photographers into two huge groups. And there's the hunter-gatherers who carry their camera around and go off hunting for the image, right? And then there's the agrarians who set things up in their studios and they kind of grow their own still lives and so forth. Tom's practice is somewhere in the middle because he's walking around to look for something that's growing just the way he likes to, and then he goes and gets his camera, comes back and captures it. So he's kind of like, he's right on the cusp between the hunter-gatherer phase of the world and, he's later than Neanderthal, but before. Yeah, he's agrarian.
I can get you some better terminology.
I need to work on that.
But it's true, it's
I
true.
need an editor.
And if you're, especially in the city, you can tell a photographer from a mile away. They have 6 cameras, but that's the way they work, and I've seen people work like that. But it isn't the way I work, and it's certainly also not the Crutzen,
Right.
scenario thing either. There are advantages to all those things, but I've sort of learned to keep it simple.
Gregory Crutzen sets up a whole mise-en-scene like a film director. That was the reference. So, not doing that. He's actually finding these things, but he's not like just wandering around hunting all the time. Yes. Oh, she would like to ask a second question.
Okay.
Is that extra?
I'm still on the cyanotype.
Okay.
The ginkgo, for example,
Yeah.
I believe there are 4 patterns. And that is
6.
6, okay. How long, you described how you do this rolling up the paper and maybe putting cardboard behind some of the paper. I can't imagine handling paper 2 by 3 feet. And I just wondered, when you exposed the whole sheet, then how long, for example, was one of those 6 pieces of paper in the sun?
Well, those are ones that have been done on the ground, right? So, and it probably was a slow day, I'm not really remembering, but put down some, wait a bit, put down some more. So the later they are, the lighter, not white, but not as contrasty. So it takes a while.
But you cover the whole sheet?
One at a time,
Yeah,
one sheet at a time.
But if you're up on a ladder, you can't do that.
No, you can't.
No, so I would say it's a little physically less dangerous or demanding when you're on the
Yeah,
ground.
it's really almost, it's different. It is very
Yeah,
different.
but when you're up on a ladder with 2 by 3 foot, I just can't imagine doing that.
Don't try.
I won't.
There are easier things that you can do.
I think we should probably wrap up, or do you want one more question? Or
Is there one more question?
I thought, did you have? No?
Okay, I think that's a great moment to wrap up. Tom, thank you so much. Go see the show! Thank you.